From your local Department of Motor Vehicles, I gotta tell you, I'm just furious right now. I just got home. I spend an ungodly amount of time at the Department of Motor Vehicles renewing my license. I go through the whole line, and the woman says to me, "Do you want to be an organ donor?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, when you die, do you want to donate your organs?" And I said, "I don't have any organs. I have a piano. I'd be happy to donate that when I die. I have a guitar. I can donate that, but I don't have any organs." And do you know, she looked at me like I'm a moron. She looked at me like I'm crazy. Look, I think organs are great. Churches sound beautiful with them. But what's wrong with a piano? What's wrong with a guitar? Those are great. How about some brass? Donating some trumpets, trombones. How about percussion? All that's great. We gotta have that too. Why organs? Why fixated on organs? I just don't get it. All right, Kurt Berglund. Gonna tell you about how I'm gonna set up my APBA Hall of Fame League and do a preview of one of the teams and talk a little bit about the challenge of putting that team together. I'm gonna work through all the teams eventually and some separate videos. But I asked a bunch of questions in my fourth Hall of Fame preview set video, and I'm gonna answer them for the league that I'm gonna set up and do in 2020. So let's talk about that. In fact, you know what? Let's go to the whiteboard. This is how we're going to set up the league, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that I've done to try and create teams from the set. There's 335 cards in the APBA Hall of Fame set, and I'm going to set up the league like this. The first thing I decided was to not use the DH. And that's because I want to be forced to go through, make some decisions about the pitchers. I also have a feeling, but I could be wrong, that this will be a fairly balanced league in terms of runs scored. I don't think it's going to be dreadful to score runs based on what I'm seeing from the hitter cards. So I'm thinking the DH may not be necessary. We'll see if that turns out to be not the case. But my hunch is that runs will be available. We'll see if that's true. Second thing is, I'm not going to do the 3-batter minimum for the bullpen. Not going to do it. Third thing, I'm not going to do the extra inning man on second rule. Not going to do that either. 25-man rosters, so I had to make a bunch of cuts. We did 8 teams, so I'm using 200 of the 335 players in the set. Going to be basic game. With the relief pitcher coming in, getting the boost if he's got the platoon advantage. But other than that, nothing terribly exotic. And the format for the schedule is going to be King of the Hill, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. But basically, the winning team keeps playing one game after one game after one game after one game, going through the list of teams. Which brings us to how many wins are you going for here? The King of the Hill teams that to get to the World Series will have 10 wins. My good friend Justin on Delphi did this with Pine Tar baseball teams, and I want to try it with these teams in APBA. We're going to do a 10 wins, and then they're done, and they're a World Series team. First two teams to get to 10 wins are World Series teams. We are going to play injuries. So they're all J0s, so it's just going to be whatever's on the boards. All right, so with all that said, what are the teams? Well, the teams are going to look like this. There's 8 of them. I'm starting with the 1901 mostly because I find the 19th century teams to be very difficult to construct and then to manage. So, plus, the rules were different. There was a lot of differences, and I just don't find the games compatible. I'm not sure they're all that compatible with the early part of the century with what's going on now, but we're going to try it that way and see how it works. So what we have are 20-year runs. 1901 to 1920 is the first team. What I did for that was to look at the document that APBA gave us with a 5-year run for the players and looked at the time period, and that determined where they were put. So for example, if you look at Louis Tiant, for example, right here, Louis Tiant would be eligible for the 70s team. Even though he played in the 60s and he played in the 80s, I'm saying the 70s are his decade because that's what APBA is telling us. All right, so then we have a team from 21 to 40. Then we have a team from 41 to 60, and I had to add a couple of pitchers to finish out their pitching staff because they only had 7 pitchers that were from this time period that were elected to the Hall of Fame. Bunning and Ford both pitched in the 50s, so I'm saying they count. So I moved them from the 60s, which is where their years were, into the team from 41 to 60 to get that team up to 9 pitchers, which is the fewest amount of pitchers on any of these teams that I set up. Then there's a team from 61 to 80. And then we've got, for the first time here, I'm breaking them into leagues. So starting at 1981 and running all the way to the present, I've got 1 American League team. And from 81 all the way to the present, I've got 1 National League team. I divided the players in a way that I thought made sense into the league that I'm saying they were part of for the most part. And we'll go through the rosters for them a couple of videos from now. Then we have the Negro League stars, who I am combining onto 1 team, and then what I'm calling the not yets. Now on some of these teams, I needed to use some of the players that have not been elected to the Hall of Fame yet to make a 25-man roster with all the positions covered and a backup at each spot because I'm playing with injuries. But the not yets are all non-Hall of Famers. They're the ones that I put together that are not yet in the Hall of Fame, not from any particular time period, but they are just not in the Hall of Fame. So what's going to happen when we do King of the Hill is that these 2 teams are going to play first. The not yets are going to play the Negro League stars. All right, so the winner of that game then goes on to play the National League from 81 to the present. The winner of that game then goes on to play the American League from 81 to the present, and so on. And if you win, you keep going. If you lose, you stop and you get back in this line. I will keep a pitching rotation going. So all these teams, their first time through, are going to use their first starter, and then their second starter, and then their third starter if they keep winning, and so on. I haven't decided on a rotation yet. I'm leaning toward 5-man, but I haven't decided that for sure yet. I may go 4. All right. So, I have finished in almost all these cases. I'm 95% set on the rosters for all 8 teams. So what I'm going to do, starting in this video, and then taking 2 at a time from here on out in subsequent videos, is to talk about the roster, how they were put together, and what I see as a scouting report for the teams. So, we will start with the 1901 to 1920 roster. This, of course, is the dead ball period. Tough to come by power in terms of home run power, but there's doubles and triples power aplenty on this team. If you look at the roster, we have Christy Matheson, Walter Johnson, Grover Alexander, Mordecai Brown, Addie Joss, Stan Kovaleski, Chief Bender, Joe McGinnity, Eddie Plank, Big Ed Walsh, and Rube Waddell. This is the only team, and this is the team that I'm still struggling a little bit with. This team has 11 pitchers, and there's 2 reasons for that, but let's go through the position players first. The catchers are Ray Schalk and Roger Bresnahan. First base, George Sisler. Second base and first base, Nap Ladjui. Second base, Eddie Collins. Shortstop, Honus Wagner. Shortstop, Joe Tinker. Third base, Frank Home Run Baker. Third base, Jimmy Collins. Outfielders, Tris Speaker, Ed Roush, Sam Crawford, Ty Cobb, and for right now, Fred Clark, although he might get launched before we actually play ball. Now, if you look back at these pitchers, what you'll see is that there are a lot of AC pitchers, and there's nobody lower than an A. Now, there are some that have Zs. There's a couple that don't have a Z. There's no AB pitchers, but they're all ACs or A's. Now, my thinking is, obviously, that this team very well could have the best pitching, although I haven't added up their defense. However, I'm anticipating, even though there are some good on-base percentages with these position players, I am anticipating that runs may be difficult for them to come by. We're certainly going to push taking the extra base and so on, but we'll see. But I think I might be pinch hitting for pitchers a fair amount, and so having an extra reliever or 2 doesn't seem like a bad idea. The other problem is that here are the guys that I cut: Chesbro, Burkett, Flick, Hooper, Marinville, Wallace, Evers, Marquard, and Chance. Nobody there is wowing me with offensive potential except for Flick and Hooper, and I think there's other guys on the roster that do it better, although I may end up cutting Clark and adding Hooper. We'll see how that goes, but other than that, that's the 25-man roster for the 1901 to the 1920 ball club, and why they are carrying 11 pitchers right now. The other problem that I had with this club is that there's so many pitchers of historic proportions here that I had trouble cutting any of them. I guess Waddell could have gone, but I've never had a KX pitcher. I don't know if there are a lot of them. I don't think there are, and I'm kind of interested to see what old Rube does with a KX. in terms of strikeouts. So there's a lot going on there. So that is the 1901 to 1920 set team preview, and a little bit of a scouting report. We'll see how that actually ends up going. And you know what? No, let's do one more. Let's do 1920 to 21 to 1940, as long as we're here. And here they are. Now this is, as you can see, we're comparing the 20-year spans. Got a lot more Hall of Famers from 21 to 40 than we do from 1901 to 1920. If you know anything about the Hall of Fame, you know that this group is overrepresented in the Hall of Fame, and there's a lot, especially outfielders, who you say, well, geez, why is he in the Hall of Fame? And there's some infielders, frankly, like that too from this time period. And so putting together this roster was a little tougher than you might think, because you got to weed through so much. But here's their roster, 21 to 40. It's Lefty Grove, Carl Hubble, Dizzy Dean, Lefty Gomez, Jesse Haynes, Epirixie, Dazzy Vance, Waite Hoyt, Ted Lyons, almost cut him. Herb Pennock almost cut him. These are the last two guys. Might get chopped later on. They're both B pitchers. They have Z modifiers. There's other guys that are as good. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, this is a 10-man staff, as you can see, with no true reliever, although Dazzy Vance and Jesse Haynes pitched a fair amount out of the bullpen, and we know that Carl Hubble and Lefty Grove did as well. Actually, a lot of these starters, it was sort of in vogue on a day off to take a turn in the bullpen. So 10 pitchers for the 21 to 40 squad, and now the position players are Bill Dickey, Gabby Hartnett, Mickey Cochran, Lou Gehrig, Hank Greenberg, Rogers Hornsby, Charlie Gehringer, Archie Vaughn, Luke Appling, Pie Traynor, Hack Wilson, Babe Ruth, Al Simmons, Mel Ott, and Joe DiMaggio. So, those are the 15 position players. 10 pitchers, 15 position players. Who were the guys that I cut? Again, couple spots I still might change, but Red Faber, Burleigh Grimes, Red Ruffing, Ducky Medwick, Heine Manouche, Chuck Klein, Harry Heilman, Chick Hayfie, Goose Goslin, Sam Rice, the Wayner brothers, Zach Wheat, Ross Youngs, Freddie Lindstrom, Joe Cronin, Dave Bancroft, Travis Jackson, Joe Sewell, Tony Lazzari, Bucky Harris, Billy Herman, Frankie Frisch, Jim Bottomley, George Kelly, Bill Terry, Ernie Lombardi, Al Lopez, Rick Farrell, Kiki Kyler, Earl Combs, Max Carey, and Earl Averill. So you can see we've got quite a collection of guys who would be candidates, as people so much like to say these days, for the Hall of Very Good, not the Hall of Fame. This team will be a good one. The only question I have about this team, as opposed to the team from 1901 to 1920, is do they have enough pitching? They have top-line pitching, but they don't have the pitching depth that some of the other teams do. On the other hand, I expect that they will score runs, and so maybe it won't matter very much. We have a pitching-heavy team at the start with the dead ballers, and then we've got a hitting-heavy team with the 21 to 40 crowd. All right, we're going to call it quits for right here. We're going to come back with another preview video of the rest of the teams coming up in the next few days. This is the APBA Hall of Fame League that I'm setting up with the brand new APBA Hall of Fame set. Want to thank you so much for joining me. My name's Kurt Berglund. Please click like and subscribe to my channel for more APBA Hall of Fame and game demos and payoff pitch and pine tar baseball and a whole lot of other stuff going on. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday. We'll talk to you soon. So long, everybody.